both ends of the spectrum. So what I will do, I've got on my table the questions of the exam. So I'm going to keep them there for the rest of the semester. You know, come up and see, say, oh, they're questions. There's 2 exams, so I'm not too sure which questions are going to come in, but I'll be talking about them, and certainly whenever I get a chance, I will be telling you this is something worth looking at, and those people who've got pens or computers probably write it down. The exam part of it should be pretty straightforward. In fact, I wasn't particularly creative in the exam. It's the same form as last year. Remember Plato's beautiful forms? You end up with a form, you copy the form, and that's the way it is. I have included a couple of questions which I'll be interested to see how you discuss them, and so we will practice them in the class. Okay, we'll play around with them. The part of the exam always includes some logic. The exam's worth 30%, 15 marks are to do with logic. These are the examples. I've printed out 65. It was very, I would say, overly anticipating the number of people here, but anyway, you can take one home and give one to your mother or something like that, so we've all got to take 2 of them. So we'll do those in the class today. And so anybody who wants to do very well in the subject, make sure you know how to do that. Anybody who does very badly in the first assignment and needs to do very well, this is it. Okay? So you need to be able to do it. It's not difficulty as in physics is difficult or high jumping is difficult, but it is a style of thinking which you need to practice, and it becomes evident in the exam. It's an open book exam, so if I were doing the exam, I'd take that sheet in with me. All right? See? When we say book, we mean it. You don't have to take it literally, if you know what I mean. So what will we cover today? The topic of logic, we'll cover that. We'll cover this idea of the black swan, whatever the black swan is. We'll talk about logic and types of logic. I'll introduce you to one of the great Australian intellectuals that we have exported to America. His name is Ken Ham. He established the Creationist University in America. So if you want to further your education after you've done your MBA and get one more step in your knowing of what life is, you can go to a Creationist University and find out. You know what you can find out? If you do a degree at the Creationist University, you'll find out that the Earth was created about 3,000 years ago. All right. It'll take you three years in the degree to find that out. But, of course, I don't mean that literally either. I don't mean that literally. Of course, so we'll start off here with where we finished last week. There are some beautiful and poetic titles for the assignments. Some people even incorporated a metaphor as part of the title for the assignments, and some people lyrically used imagery and metaphor in their analysis. Beautiful. You know, if you read 100 papers and you come to one that uses metaphor and imagery, it feels like you have reached an oasis after walking across the desert for many hours. Right? It's got a physical effect. Of course, those of you who watched the film last time we met last week will recognise what imagery and metaphor does. In fact, this is one of the exam questions. Why is imagery effective? If you watched the film last week, what does metaphor and imagery do in a brain sense? What was the film we saw? I mean, you've had a busy week. What was the film we saw last week? It wasn't particularly high res. I don't know why it was so badly, like it was not a great vision. Can anyone remember what the film was? The Stroke of Insight. And the whole story was that there's 2 sides of the brain. And most people spend most of their life on which side? It's only got a 50% chance, so you don't have to be too nervous. You've got a pretty good chance. Which one? On the left. Most people spend more time on the left than on the right. And metaphor and imagery not only takes you to the right side of the brain, but it takes your audience there. And it's a place where people have got a different feeling. That's when she talked about her stroke. She said it was this total, like a drug hippie experience, we are one, and all the sort of thing. And of course, the whole process, this is what, this is what I say, that the subject is interesting to me, because the first assignment's pretty straightforward. You've done it, either badly or well. The next assignment, those people who are interested in doing it have already chosen a topic that we're going to talk about the way to construct it. The exam is pretty straightforward, right? So we don't want to make that anything more than it is. The main centrepiece of this assignment is the second assignment. The first assignment's really practice. Second assignment's the thing. The exam is just to sort of conclude this, to ask you a couple of questions. And it seems that, to me, going through this material a couple of times, that if you don't use imagery and metaphor in the second assignment, you have failed the subject. See what I mean? You can still pass, of course. But you've missed the point. You have totally missed that point. I don't think I can say it more clearly, Totally missed the point. That the whole purpose of critical discourse analysis is about what's the one word? Which one? Power. The one word is about power. The one word is about power. There's no question in the exam about that, but use it liberally. And so the whole game is, if you call it a game, that's a metaphor. The whole game is to gain power over your audience, so they will buy cryptocurrency, or so they will buy your religion, or so they will buy your house, or so they will whatever. Of course, the subject is about management or business and critical thinking. And so, of course, when you're the managing director of some company in the Philippines or in India or in Australia or in England or wherever it is of the world, you're going to have to not convert people to a religion, but often during your 40-year career, you are going to have to get people to believe something that they did not believe before. You're going to get them to believe something. Not only believe it's possible, but in fact believe in something that they can't often imagine. That they cannot imagine. And so the imagery in the first one here, the black swan, speaks directly to this. I was thinking about this during the last day or so. And so, it's a fair question. At the end of the semester, people write feedback to the subject. And one of the criticisms was, where's the focus on business? So this is a good point. The problem is that many times your organisation is doing this, and something happens, and then you've got to do this. And so what many managers do, my guess is somewhere between 60 and 95%, is that they tell people from the left brain a whole lot of reasons why they should do it. They tell people facts, and they must do it. And people, as they do, go to sleep after the third thing. Blah, 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 I'm asleep. It's the people who just go a little bit over the side with some sort of metaphor or imagery, and all of a sudden, this man here, who was going to be totally asleep with his eyes open because he didn't want to lose his job, will now be eating out of the palm of your hand and wanting to climb Mount Everest with you, or go into the depths of the ocean with you, or to battle the forces of the whatever with you. You see? It's the quickest, most effective way of doing it. It's not difficult. It's a different language. Of course, it's one of the things, I can get a guitar. I've played a guitar for 40 years. I could show you a chord. But only those people who play music, the rest, if you haven't played any music, showing you these fingers and doing this, it doesn't mean anything, you see? It's a foreign language. There's too many internal concepts which make it unattainable. So you give them a guitar, like people say, oh, you want to learn guitar? Here's a guitar. This is how you do it. Get it on the internet. And of course they don't. 90%, I'll make up. It's probably 95% of people buy guitars, they don't learn them. Because they look at it and they say, I don't get it. So metaphor, I understand. This, in a sense, this is, if we had great data of all the exam papers, and and the speeches is actually much more interesting, get the speeches and find out, despite, like I do this every year, speech, metaphor, blah, 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 to find out what percentage of the students actually use a metaphor, like it's probably only 15%. So I'm talking to those 15%. Maybe you are those 15%, I'm not too sure. You see? But it's a bit like saying, the subject is about power. Critical discourse analysis is about the person who is controlling the flow of the discourse. Of course, if you're in management, there's a power imbalance anyway. So you've got the whip handle, you might say. But you've got to be able to do something with it. You see? Otherwise, he's scared of you because he doesn't want to lose the job, and I just say, do this, and he says yes. Whereas if we say, look, we're going to go on a journey, right? And then see? You're doing it. He's doing it. You're into it. Remember that the only purpose, if you're going to build a rocket to the moon, of course you have to put all the screws in the right place, which is very left brain. You've got to make sure you've got the right fuel and the right food and the right whatever. But the excitement or the motivation, the stimulation to be part of this going to the moon thing starts with imagining. Starts with imagining it. One of the questions in the exam is how, in the first lecture it said creative and critical thinking go together. Remember that? No, you don't anyway. Pretend, just say, yeah, he pretend, he didn't. All right, so of course that's a good question to ask. And to tell you the truth, in a way, I thought when I wrote the question, it's quite a difficult question for you. Like, how is this creative and critical thinking together? But as I'm giving you this example, of course we can see that these two things are coming together. If you want to get somebody to do something different, it is a very creative thing. You are literally creating the future. You're creating a different company, you're creating a different style of operation, you're creating something. And of course, people who are not creative want to do things in the same way, like the chooks in the chook pen. They eat there and they do this. So many people in organisations are stuck in the same way because they've been trained to. You get paid in Australia 50 grand or 70 grand or 100 grand to do the same thing over and over again. That's as much reinforcement as you want. I don't know if I've shown you already that you can teach pigeons how to play ping pong. Have I shown you that one? All right, I'll show you. It's only a 1-minute video, but it shows if you can teach pigeons to play ping pong, you can get people for 50 grand to keep on doing the same thing over again. All right? You wouldn't say the pigeons are really intelligent, but they're trained. So to get people to do something different is a major creative activity. Not creative like painting a picture, although we could use that as a metaphor, but creative in literally creating a different way of living, creating a different way of being in the world. So it's, you see? So the person who is the manager, so this girl here, what is your first degree in? What is your first degree in? Yeah, what's your undergraduate? Economics. So she becomes she's an economics person, she's got an MBA, she gets a job in some big company or she creates a big company. Now, if she's purely a technocrat, a number cruncher, then when it comes her time to inspire these people to change their organisation, it may not work. Of course, it wouldn't be a shame, it wouldn't be such an embarrassment because, there's many studies about the percentage of organisational change efforts that do not achieve their targets. There's many reasons why, but I suspect that one of them is because the people do not buy into the change. That's the language they use in the management textbooks. You probably read some of them. That the people did not buy into the change. And so the power of the speech is to get this You see? What have I got? Words. Words are power. You know, I mean, I can use a stick, but words are power. And so I can use words to construct a speech. And if the speech is any good, it will change people, it will lift people, it will get them to reappraise themselves, it will make them feel different. It's one of the reasons why I put music on it before I come in here. I mean, when I come in here. You put music on, it changes. You know, like otherwise it's just a cold room on a Friday. Turn the music up loud, it changes the room. So, the exercise, you know, if we just had a simple one assessment for the subject, we'd get all of you, if we had the time, it was quite difficult, there's 200 people, we'd get all of them to come past here, stand in front and read their 7-minute to 10 minutes presentation. If everyone went to sleep, they fail. If everyone asked them questions, they get a HD. If people are still awake, we'll give them a pass. All right? You see, that's it. Now, if I will give you 2 reasons now to answer the question, what is the simplest technique you can use to engage your listener? It's easy because I've told you 5 times already so far. Go on, tell me. There you go. See, HD student. You only need 1 out of a class of whatever there is, 50 students. Nice to meet you. All right? The rest of you, forget it. I'm only interested in this girl now. Imagery and metaphor. See, I'm not really telling you this because I want you to pass the exam. That should be pretty straightforward. I'm telling you this because I think if you don't get this, then the rest of it is a waste, you see? I'm not saying everything else is a waste, but if you don't get this, it's like the key that tilts things. So once you've got that, of course you can't just say, you know, we're going to do an organisational change. I've got this beautiful poem I wrote, you know, we're going to go down the river, you know, and it's going to be dangerous, blah, blah, blah. Of course you've got to have intelligence behind it. So once you match the right brain stuff, the imagery, the metaphor, there's a tricolons. Anyone know what a tricolon is? The endings, the 3 things you have the same. The 3 endings of sentences are the same. The power of 3, repeating 3. Alliteration, using all of those, that list of literary techniques. You include those in to turn your broth into some sort of interesting soup. Of course, you can't do any of this if the topic you've chosen is something that you don't care about. See, that's why, you know, you've got, so you've had 7 weeks to choose a topic. Have you chosen one? Not yet, right? That's all right, 7 weeks. We've got another 5 weeks or so. But the reason why I want to get you thinking, and of course it doesn't, you know, sometimes just the gestation process, you know, maybe you're going to ask me again next week, what is the topic? The gestation process is to find something which is worthy of your intelligence. That's what you're looking for. Find something which is worthy of you, because then you can put something into it. And then once you've got that, then you can apply the metaphor and the logical structure and all the bits and pieces on top of it. All right? So that's what the story is today. I've given you 2 exam questions, haven't I? 2. There's only 10 I've got to tell you. So The Silent Call of the Black Swan, what a beautiful lyrical title. Last week we talked about this briefly, but I didn't talk about it. I'll come back to it at the end. Oh no, I will briefly talk about this. One of Plato's ideas was that when we know the world, you know, we think we know the world, what's going on. Remember that the aim of critical thinking is to orientate ourselves to the world and then to make decisions. Plato was saying, one of the problems is that we are often like prisoners who have been taken into a cave, like the guys on the screen, chained to a seat, and we're watching shadow puppets in the front of us. You see? And then at the back, there is a cave with a fire, and in front of the fire there's some people with shapes of a cow or a goat or a spear or something else. And so the slaves, the captives, the prisoners, look at the screen, you know, it's equivalent to this screen here, and they think they are seeing reality. They think they are seeing animals. They think they are seeing animals move around and things happening to it. But of course they're not. They're seeing an image or a representation of the animals which have been cut out by somebody and then have been put behind a projection. So this is Plato saying, look, we think we know what the world is. Of course, it's a chair, we know it is. You know, you bump into it. But to understand our life, we think we've got an idea. Plato says, look, before you think too hard, just have a look at these guys, the prisoners who are locked into a way of seeing things, and they're only looking at a second or third-hand representation of what's going on. Of course, literally, this is what happens. If you get a president who is stuck in front of a TV for 18 hours a day, just for example, he's looking literally at a... You see? Now, this is the joke. Plato was talking about this 2,000 years ago. And now you literally have people looking at screens. And they say, I saw this on the screen, therefore it is true. I watched Big Brother, romance on the, you know, whatever the kissing show is, The Bachelor. That is real, you see? People come away and say, wow, did you see he fell in love with her, or she, you know, gave him a rose, or whatever the case may be. Plato would say, see, I told you, it's all constructed, mate. What we don't know, of course, is there's the girl with the roses, and there's somebody over there off screen saying, look, give it to the big guy with black hair and we'll give you an extra 10 grand. So she says, oh, I've just fallen in love with you, you see? And everybody watches it, oh yes, I knew, the synergy, I could see straight away. He was the most romantic and I'm glad that she's done that. See? There he is. Plato is saying this 2,500 years ago. People are crazy. They think that they know the world. They're only seeing a representation which is third hand, which is constructed. They're being manipulated. Of course, if you're going to give a speech, you want to be the manipulator. Right? You want to be able to manipulate the message so that people see it in a way which makes sense to them. So Plato and Socrates are important for the subject. You know, so there's the Lunic version of it. I'd rather watch the TV, the sunrise on the TV, rather than go outside and watch the sunrise, because it's better in colour. See? I'd rather watch it. It's better. So we use the understandoscope to look down at the world and say, oh yes, well this is the lens that I see things through. So that's what critical thinking is supposed to be doing. Say, look, you should be every so often jolted to recognise that some of the things that you and I think are true are not true. We see it occasionally in the news, you know. We think we're recycling and now we find out they're just chucking the stuff in the rubbish. So it's all a big charade. You know, at my house, at your house, we've got the yellow bin and the green bin and the other bin. And some, you know, we find out they're chucking it all in the same place. It was an illusion. It made us feel good because we could say, oh, here's this, I'm not using the earth stuff, I'm recycling. See? So constantly we're being confronted by this idea that what we thought was true is not true at all. It's an illusion. So Plato and his cave is good stuff. So there's the picture. You should know what they're about by now. Which, see, it's by halfway, the idea in the lecture room is so big, you know, if I had little ropes, I should mark it so that we're all sitting down here nice and close for the last 5 weeks. But by the second half of the semester, the students should have something to say. So I'll ask you, which of these images is the one which tells you something about this subject? There you go. It's a good question. Which of the images tells you something about this subject? So what does the picture of Gandhi tell us about the subject? You see, yeah, that's all right. See, it's a half-formed idea. That's good. Give him a hand. What does Gandhi tell us? What does Gandhi, in the context of this, what does Gandhi tell us? Some people in their assignment 1 talked about Brookfield. Brookfield's got a number of tricks. How many? How many? He used the trick of symbolism. He used to wear a top hat and tail and a bow tie. When he decided to make a significant change to India, make it independent, he decided that he couldn't simply use his mouth. Because the thing that he understood is that the aim of communication is to share. You see, this man here was looking at, he'd give me a hug. So we've literally got to be, he's resisting me. We want to be on the same page. We want, and you see, the most interesting thing I've read about in management is people now start talk about the resonance of ideas. Really great ideas resonate. Of course, that's what music, when you get a whole lot of people dancing at a party, everybody is literally resonating to the 1, 2, 3, 4 of the beat, you see? That's what feels so great. And so Gandhi says, look, in a country of the size of India, before social media, with, 13 languages or something like that, is there? More. A lot of languages. What's the most powerful way I can communicate with all of them? Now, of course, he was a very educated lawyer, so he can do fancy talk, you might say. Fancy logical arguments. But he said most people, many people in India, I think the larger percentage in India, were uneducated. And so the simplest way that I can communicate with them is to get on their level, to wear exactly the same clothes. So in me, they recognise themselves. And so if they recognise themselves in me, then we've got a half a chance of being able to do something together. And of course, that's always the intended purpose. And so he did it. You read some books about Gandhi and they'll say it cost Gandhi's machine thousands of dollars a day to make him look like a peasant. All right, you can imagine the proud. I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but you see, it was such an important way. He was smart enough to understand that the game wasn't just to talk with your left brain. You have to move to your right brain. So he used his clothes. He used symbolism. He used the walk for the salt walk. Somebody here should be able to tell me how far it was. Anyone? He had a long walk to get the salt, to go to the... It was illegal for Indians in the time to own salt or to sell salt. And so he walked to the beach where the salt was. Right? This is it. You see, how do you communicate with people? Walk alongside them. Get them to walk alongside you and see that you've done something interesting. It's much more powerful than blah, 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 even if you're a logical, educated person. So I would agree that of all those pictures, that the Gandhi is the most evocative. It talks about somebody who really understood. And of course the proof is in the pudding, because he embarked on something. It took him 28 years to be able to achieve it. See, very interesting. The one that I think that I continue to use is the woman climbing the rock. You know, when I'm learning music, which I've got to learn some new pieces. In a piece of music which goes on for, say 200 bars, there's usually about 3 or 4 bars that are the difficult bars. Of course, this imagery says, look, just a series of problems. Don't think the whole piece is difficult. Just find the problems, solve them, learn how to solve them, and that's it. See, it's very practical. So this week we talk about the black swan and problems that we face. And then look at 2 ways of solving the problems. I then have got the types of logic. 3 types of logic which magically appear in red because... What's that? We already learned them. If we already learned them, great, because they'll be on the exam. You know, they've got a 50% chance, I should say, of being on the exam. What are they? What should they do? We were looking at verifying if logic is good or not. Valid and sound argument, and essentially that's the sheets of paper that we're going to have a go at. And then the reconstruction of arguments is in parts. The black swan is a metaphor, or was a metaphor. Black swan, any ideas what the metaphor represents? The black swan. Of course, the black swan is not only a metaphor, but it's an actual thing. So there is a black swan. Any ideas what a black swan might represent? Okay. What's that? A rare species. Well, getting very close to it. So let's have a look at it. Logic in the black swan. The black swan used to be a metaphor for something that would never happen. A black swan event. People would talk in historical terms. People would talk about a black swan event as something that would never happen. For example, when someone is really excited in this subject, they're going to climb up to the roof. That's a black swan event. It's never going to happen. All right? Because, you see, it comes from the Latin expression of it, so it's a very, very old term. One of the problems, or the origin of it, was that in the Northern Hemisphere, all swans are white. And so nobody had ever seen anything apart from a white swan. And so they would say, that's a black swan event, as in, it's never going to happen, because it can't happen because there is no such thing. Then the explorers sailed into Perth, which is West Australia. And of course they call it the Swan River because there's a lot of swans and the swans are black. And so all of a sudden, what happens? This is a very interesting point. If you believe that there's no such thing as a black swan, right? And the black swan's a metaphor for something's never going to happen. And then you see face to face with the black swan. There it is. The black is turned from a man to a black swan. What do you say? What's that?
Black swan is no more a metaphor.
It's no longer a metaphor, that's right. Black swan is a real thing. We thought, like the guys in the cave, that there's no such thing as a black swan. And it was just a metaphor for something crazy that would never happen. And now, face to face with the black swan, we say, wow, we were wrong. Of course, there is an alternative response to this. What's the alternative response to the black swan, the sighting of the black swan? What's the alternative response to a black swan? So that's a positive. Well, that's something we've discovered something new, right? So maybe we're not going to call it a swan. We call it a black something else. What else?
We don't know what else is there.
Of course, the positive view, that is, if you are, remember that the whole process, what we're trying to do, is we're trying to connect with reality, orientate ourselves to it. So we've gone back in history. There's no such thing as a black swan. No such thing as a black swan. Black swans are rare. Now we see a black swan. So then we say, we never used to think that a black swan was possible. A black swan is possible. What other stuff might be possible that we never thought of? So it starts to open your mind. So one way is it opens your mind to possibilities. Of course, the other one is that you close it shut. You look at the black swan and you say, no, that can't be a black swan. Can you give me a gun, please? Right? Well, it can't be, you see? Because people, the problem is, and you see, so that's why I was so excited, I suppose you'd say, watching that Jeff Lichtman thing, looking at all these things in the brain. So people over our lifetime, we've constructed this beautiful map in our mind of what the world is. And now you're going to throw in something which upsets the whole idea. So I can either say, oh, well, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, I'm going to have to rethink everything. Or I'm going to say, no way, mate, kaboom, kaboom. Right, I want you on a black swan mission. Go and get all the black swans, because we believe there's no such thing as a black swan, you see? Now, people do that every day of the week, I have to say. People do that every day of the week. Every day. See? Of course, the reason why they do it is clear. You've grown up, your mum's taught you this, your dad's taught you this, you've grown up, you understand life. I know life. Remember? People your age, average age 26, you're a very intelligent people. You've got a degree, you're doing an MBA, you're on a successful journey, you're smart. And then somebody throws something to you that doesn't fit into your worldview. No, it can't be true. It can't be true. Cannot be true. See? Because it upsets your sense of yourself, your world map. You know, in your head you've got this world map and it's all sorted out. There's money and there's power and there's this and there's that and there's that. And now the black swan is going to blow things up. Of course, here is the hard question. Give me an example in business of black swan events. Hey, that's a very good question. Should have put this on the exam. One year I'm going to choose somebody who turns up every week. Do you turn up every week? And get them to write down that question. It's a great question. That'd be a very good exam question. Give me an example. So this is it. What's that? Artificial intelligence is a black swan event. People never thought it could be, and now it is. Of course, if we get 3, then you will know there's 100, all right? So the black swan is the actual one. Artificial intelligence is the second one. We only need 1 more, and then all of you will know 15. It's that third one. It's always a hard thing, you know, to get the triangle of knowledge, it's called. I made that up, all right? What's the third black swan event? Tesla. A fully electric car. Which is faster. There's a video that I can show you on, have you seen it? It goes from 0 to 100 k's in about 3 seconds. Of course, the black swan, artificial intelligence, Tesla, mobile phone, the internet, keep going, come on, laptop, computer, whatever that thing's called, a tablet. Whoever thought you could have a tablet and walk around? Uber. New business models. You see? Uber. Penicillin. Of course, all you've got to do is to wind the story back of history, of what you knew, or go back in time, and you'll find that there's black swan events. They've always been. And of course, in 2018, you know, in 2030, we'll look back, look at the things they believed in. This is, you know, in the next 12 years, there is going to be some fundamental changes. The only problem is, if it's related to your business and you're the leader of your business, you're going to have to convince the people who didn't believe in black swans to believe in black swans. You're going to be the person who's going to convince people that that technology is real. The reason why Kodak went out of business is because they didn't believe that digital camera thing. They thought it was like a toy, you know. Do you remember pet rocks? You probably don't. Pet rocks were a thing. People would go into a shop and buy a rock and they'd have a string on it, and of course it didn't last very long because it was a stupid toy, but people would buy it for a while. They thought it was an oddity. And so a whole business went out of business. Encyclopedias was a business for a long, long time. It was killed, of course, by the CD and then the internet. You know, it's ridiculous. To go in, you imagine buying a set of books with for $1,000. And that's going to tell you the answer to everything. That was what people used to sell. They had a business. It was an international business. Everybody who sold them, they'd knock on the doors and say, look, have you got some children? The only way they're going to be successful in life is if you get them all of the knowledge. And all of the knowledge in the world is contained in these books. Now, of course, it was a lie before the internet and it was a lie after the internet. But more importantly, as a business model, if you were the owner of Encyclopaedia Britannica, you should have had your eyes on the 10 years in advance and say, this business model's not going to last. The problem was that they were making so much money out of them. To print off 1,000, like, you know, I think they used to have about 18 books. To have 18 books, to print them off would cost you maybe $70, $200 max. So there's $800. Salesman gets $400, the office takes $200, the big chiefs get another $2, whatever is left over. They didn't want to give it up because it was such a good thing. And so they didn't give it up. See? They didn't want to give it up, so they didn't give it up. And they fell off the cliff. They fell off the cliff. The point at which they fell off the cliff was when the CD-ROM with all of the stuff in the Encyclopaedia Britannica times 100 was selling for $89. So you could either buy $1,000 for the books, which are out of date as soon as they're printed, or you could buy a CD-ROM with all of that stuff times 100 for $80, which, you know, see, the consumer didn't have any attachment to the old model, so they bought it. The company went broke. It's a way of it. So it's quite difficult to be able to know what you don't know. See, the Socratic problem or challenge is that we don't know, we're not as smart as we think we are. In business, that is a practical problem for you to deal with. As you're planning the strategy of your business and planning which country to go in and which products, this is a very practical problem. So, Nicholas Taleb, he wrote the book The Black Swan. He predicted the global financial crisis 2 years out. That's when he wrote the book. And so I bought his recent book, and he writes with the arrogance of somebody who predicted a world event. Right? He said, look, it's coming. Of course, the people in the financial market said, no, it's not going to happen. Because it wasn't their interest to see the reality. So there he is, he'd written a book, you know, as a bestseller, predicting in a couple of years the global financial crisis will hit because of all these things, and the stack of cards will fall to the ground. No, it won't happen. Won't happen. A black swan event. So there is, you see the exam's all written. That would have been a good question. What is a black swan? What is a black swan event? Give me 4 examples from 2000 and something. Yep. You asking me, or are you going to tell me? Look, I mean, there's people smart in here who are smarter than me. They should be able to tell me the best example. What's the best example? Of course, you could say Tesla and Elon Musk. You know, he's the man of the moment. But you go back into any time and you'll find that there was a person, Walt Disney, I read his biography a couple of years ago. He was the black swan. At the time when he got into animation, all movies were in black and white, and there was no talking. Right? Of course, people in the industry said, that's it. Right? Can't happen. And he had the vision and the foresight to say, no. He had to convince his brother, who was his financial manager, to borrow any way you can. I want you to get a couple of $100,000 because we are going to make a film with recorded voice. Everybody was saying you're crazy. Of course, within the context of history, you know, we say, oh, as if, you know, why would you watch TV when you couldn't hear people talking? They did. I can remember back when televisions were black and white. Yeah, why wouldn't you have colour? See? So depending on which age you go to, you could go to any age. And that's going back 400 years or 700 years. One of the things, of course, that many wars were won by the latest technology that somebody couldn't imagine. Somebody thinks of a new strategy, a new way. You know, if you're hand-to-hand combat, and so what about if we get on horses? Then somebody says, what about if we have some sort of propulsion device? The people who come up with a new idea win the wars for a couple of years. Then somebody comes up with another thing, like a gun or a... You see? So the history is replete with these things that nobody could imagine until one person imagined them. That's where this creative part of the critical thinking skill comes in. That's what the answer to whatever question is, you see? That the because the creating, if you, some of you have obviously read the textbook. If you look at the textbook, it says, you know, it's got the two diagrams with the creative and critical thinking, and it seems, me looking at it, as I've done a number of times, say, all right, there, I understand it's creative, but we're so locked into creativity as being an artist or something like this. Whereas the creative person is the ones who can see a different way. Literally, they can create a new way of addressing, the problems that we've faced. History of the computer, you know, some people will remember the 3.5-inch floppy disk. Do you remember? Which wasn't floppy, of course, because it was hard. Then there was the 4 1/4, and then you go back, and then there's the tapes. At each stage of the changes in computers, the company who was the most successful in making the previous technology either went broke or was taken over by the next company. Because they had the same problem of the encyclopedia. They were making too much money selling the current technology, you know, the 4 1/4, which was literally floppy. So when somebody came up with the 3.5, they said, no, it's not going to take on. Why would everybody change to that way? See? So that's where the creativity comes in. That to be able to see things in a totally different way is a creative skill. And it's not something which people have universally got. So the type of problems that we face, Dewey says, look, life's just a series of problems. You've got to find out, get the evidence and solve the problems. Of course, many of the problems we've got are very small and inconsequential. You know, what clothes to buy, what food to wear, what television shows to watch, how many references to use, and indeed what topic to use for this great assignments. Of course, some of them are much larger and important, and they deserve some scrutiny and attention. You know, which health practitioners will I go when I'm feeling well? And of course, the big questions, you know, what job will I take? Is he or she the one? What's my life's purpose and meaning? And then, of course, the ultimate questions, which, of course, religion and philosophers addresses. So what does it all mean? You know, what's it about? Of course, if you stay within the moment to moment, then the big questions are relevant. A lot of young people get overwhelmed by the big question, and it literally overwhelms their life. So, well, why get out of bed? You know, what's it worth anyway? You know, I'm going to die sometime. You know, you see. So, being able to address those or change the lenses through which you look at these problems is a skill. Of course, there's a few interesting people who have been writing about this topic. Daniel Kahneman, there's the book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Say that again? Of course, the role of comedy is literally to make us look at things creatively. That's what in a joke, I can't think of any jokes at the moment, but the whole point of a joke is you set up a situation where you expect that people will think that this happens and something else happens. The original, apparently, you know, when I was studying psychology, they said for all cultures there is an original joke, the very first joke, and the joke goes like this. Let's see if I take this way. You have a baby who's in the cot, it's only young. And then you've got the mother or father, so I'll be the father. And so the child can see the father, and then the father bobs down behind the cot. And of course the child goes, "Where's she gone?" And then I pop my head up and say, "Here I am." And of course the kid laughs, even though it's I did this with my kids, of course, as no doubt your parents did with you. And the joke is, you thought I was gone, but I'm here. You see? You thought I was gone, but that I was going to leave you, but I'm here. So it's it's a lovely joke in a way. But it's a setup for all other jokes. You see, we're setting up some expectation, and then we put up a different answer or a different solution which surprises us and shows how we tend to think. You know, a lot of people get very depressed. They think, my life is all bad. You see, they get stuck in, it's a bit like the mother has left them. And then the comedy or the laughter is the way, if you get somebody who's depressed laughing, you're halfway to the therapy. You say, "Oh yeah, how stupid. For the last 2 years I've been thinking that everything's bad, but it's not." See? So being able to get people thinking a different way is often a source of great creativity. And so I agree. But laughter is, the cliche of laughter is the best medicine. Laughter is a creative way of looking at the same problem. This guy, Daniel Kahneman, he's a psychologist and a writer about management. He's been writing about management for the last 15 or 20 years that I've been conscious of. And he first started writing about the problem of senior managers or executives. Here is a problem. We'll take our man here. He's gone from being a black swan to my great friend to a dead swan, and now we'll put him up as a CEO of a company. So now he's 24. He goes on a trajectory. He makes the right decision, gets a job as a manager, gets another job as a senior manager, gets another job as a senior manager. Now he's the CEO of the company. One of the problems of that is that he is feeling great about himself. He's feeling that he is the smartest person in the room, which he may well be. Unfortunately, the smartest person in the room doesn't actually necessarily make you smart. And the problem is that he might surround himself by people who have got it in their interest to tell him that he's smarter than he is. And so the thing that Kahneman studied first was the big mistakes that corporations make, because the guy at the top thinks he's smarter than he is. You see this? You get into a pattern, you see, oh, so he's smart. He makes decisions, you get promoted, he gets better, he's getting stronger, confident, you see? I am the king of the world, sort of thing.